everybody. Buenas noches. My name is Liz Fernandez, and I am the NYSAIS Job Fair coordinator. I've been doing this role for about 26 years, and I'm also a former candidate. I'm really excited to welcome you this evening. Whether you are watching us live, fantastic, or you are listening or viewing this at your own time asynchronously, the important thing is that you've decided to tune in and that you're considering a career within independent schools, or you're already in a school and you're interested in making a transition to a new school. And you just want to know from the panel tonight what you need to be aware of and what strategies you might want to integrate. You might hear things that you would consider writing down and using them as tips and strategies as you prepare for Saturday, February 21st, the NYSAIS Job Fair to Promote Diversity from 10 to 1 p.m. at Columbia Grammar and Preparatory School. For now, if you are watching us live and there are questions that come up for you, please send them directly to me so that I could pose them to our panelists via the chat. And if you don't have questions, that's okay. Then just listen and take notes. And of course, we're always here to support you. Tonight, I am particularly appreciative of this team of leaders, educators, and really incredible advocates for diversity, equity, belonging in our schools. And they'll talk a little bit about their own experience. I'll ask them to introduce themselves and let us know where they work and in what role. How long have they been at their current school? But also, kind of a more general, how long have you been in independent schools? Each one of them is in a different role, specifically around hiring. And they'll talk a little bit about the lens that they're approaching this conversation. So with that, I'm going to ask April to go first, and then Ramon and Roxanne. Thanks, everybody.
Good evening, everyone. My name is April Thompson, and I am the director of lower school at the Calhoun School on the Upper West Side. And I have been in independent schools for the past 11 years in a variety of roles. Um, you said something else, Liz, and I already missed what else
Okay.
I'm supposed to share. Calhoun is an independent school, independent progressive school that goes from preschool all the way through to 12th grade. But I specifically work in our lower school division that is responsible for 2.8-year-olds all the way through the. Did I get everything?
Sure. And tell us a little bit about, because you didn't just start in this role at Calhoun. So tell us a little bit about your journey.
Sure. I started in independent schools as a class in a small progressive school in Washington, D.C., where I taught in second grade for a really long time and then fifth grade for a while, before I became an assistant director of lower school and then ultimately moved to New York to become the director of lower school at Calhoun, which is where I landed and where I am now. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening, folks. Hello, beautiful people. My name is Ramon Javier. I'm head of school at George Jackson Academy. I'm in my fourth year at GJA, and I started out with education access programs, Prep for Prep, the Teak Fellowship. My first role in schools was with KIP. I was a founding mental health counselor, and that was back in 2009. And then I started in independent schools in 2012 at Packer as a director of diversity, and then 4 years at Trinity, and then I've been at GJ since 2022. And yeah, I participate in all aspects of hiring for our school, and luckily I've been able to do that in my previous roles at my previous schools. So I've been one of the people that interviews all candidates throughout my career. So, and I'm really happy to be here and give back.
Hi, everyone. I'm Roxanne Leff. I am the assistant head of school at the Brooklyn Heights Montessori School. It's a 2-year-old to eighth grade school in Cobble Hill, Brooklyn. Don't let the name fool you. It's actually the only Montessori school in the city of New York and maybe the state. I always forget, and I need to clear that up. That actually goes from 2-year-olds all the way through eighth grade. I'm in my eighth year there. I was hired there as the head of the middle school and then moved up to be the assistant head of school. Um, Before that, I started my career in education in Cambridge, Massachusetts, at a school there where I did teacher training and then taught middle school humanities for a while. And then when I wanted to move to New York City, I met Liz Fernandez at this job fair. And so this job fair is where I got my first job in New York City at the Ethical Culture Fieldston School. So I've worked in a number of kinds of schools, progressive schools, K-8 schools, K-12 schools, held a number of roles, classroom teacher, diversity coordinator, dean of students, assistant head of middle school head, and now assistant head of school. And in my current role, I actually oversee hiring for my school. And so I'm involved in hiring from teachers through admin and facilities and all kinds of people at the school.
Thank you all. I mean, such wealth of experience. Thank you for giving us a much richer picture of all of the experience that you're bringing to this conversation and the guidance that you're going to offer our candidates who are listening. I think it's really important for us to ground ourselves in the understanding that hiring has changed a little bit each year. Certainly during COVID, there was a complete shift to all uh, it was done all virtually, including this job fair. And then in coming back, and now 5 years later, we're in some cases, a hybrid structure, or maybe it's all in person, maybe everybody's back to being all in person, or some version of virtual in-person hybrid. I'm just curious, what, how are your schools approaching the 2026 hiring season for teaching positions? And I want to distinguish teaching from administrative positions because we know they're two different and similar processes. And they're always done with committees and all of that. But for now, for this moment, how is your school approaching the 2026 hiring season for teaching positions? What is virtual? What's in person? Hybrid? What does the structure look like? Um, let's do Roxanne, April, and then Ramon.
Sure. So our school, the standard process is once we post the job on our website and send it out to all of our partner organizations to post it. Um, First round is a phone call with everyone. Um, and that's usually with two people from our school, an administrator and a teacher, two teachers, an administrator and a teacher, two administrators. Preliminary phone call about 30 minutes. Then after that, it's a Zoom call with the candidate and our hiring committee, which could be up to 4 or 5 people, and it's a mix of roles, but it's an opportunity to get to start to getting to know people in our school and what they do. And that's usually about 45 minutes. And then the final round for a teaching position would be to come to school and meet more teachers, get a tour, um, do a demonstration lesson and maybe a writing sample, some kind of scenario response, meeting our head of school. Uh, and that's it. So it's like three: phone, Zoom, in person.
I would say at Calhoun, it's not too far off from what Roxanne shared. I think the biggest difference is we would start with, instead of a phone call, it's just an initial Zoom interview with myself or my assistant director in the lower school. And it's like that initial screening to meet the person, get to know them, decide if it's a good fit for the division. And then from there, it would be a second Zoom interview with a larger committee, and that committee is typically made up of most likely a member of the teaching team that we're hiring for. So if it's a fourth grade position, it would probably be a member of that fourth grade team, maybe some specialist teachers or other teachers or members of the team that the teacher would be teaching on, and other teachers or individuals in a division that are interested in participating in that process. And then the third step in that process would be similar to what Roxanne shared, a visit coming into campus for the day, spending time getting to know our community, doing a demo lesson, meeting people, meeting our head, and spending time with students to see if it's a good fit. Um, and then from there, probably checking references and doing all of those things. I also think there's a huge distinction between if it happens right now during the school year versus if it were to happen towards the end of the year or over the summer.
Uh, the only thing I would add is just the resume piece, right? Definitely scanning, you know, all the resumes and trying to sift out some folks. So that'd be the kind of the only thing I would add is that resume review.
Thanks. So, quick summary, it's a multi-step process. It involves some kind of initial contact or connection with. It's probably done with an initial email or, an outreach in some way to schedule. So for candidates thinking about what email are you using? I would always discourage you from using any work-related emails and to really think about what the email address is. I say this all the time. I'm too cute for you at gmail.com. It may not be the appropriate email for this moment. So really think about that. And then the next step I would say that I heard is some version of Zoom. So thinking about how comfortable are you connecting with people over Zoom, anticipate some of the questions, thinking about um, the timing, what's going to be ambient around you, the lighting, the setting, all the things that to some extent we thought was way behind us post, during the pandemic. They're still relevant and it's still important because many schools do that initial Zoom screen or even a Zoom interview. And the last thing I want to highlight is committees. There's always some version of a committee, and there's a process of meeting multiple people along the way. April, you alluded to this, you were responding to the question if it were happening right now. How would you say it would be different if inevitably there is a vacancy that becomes available later in the year or even over the summer, which is often the case?
Sure. I think you're right. Inevitably, I'm always finding myself hiring at some point over the summer, which I do not love. I think the biggest difference is it's harder to bring a candidate to campus. There's usually no students on campus, so we don't always bring a candidate in for a demo lesson because we don't have kids on campus. And so the biggest difference there is a lot of times we may ask a candidate to submit a lesson plan, or if they have a video lesson or something recorded, we may ask them to submit that, and they may have a Zoom interview with the head versus coming in for a meeting with the head, stuff like that.
Fantastic. And that was another thing I also neglected to mention. Um, the heads of school are often part of the process, and they're usually near the end of the process. So it is a long, exhaustive experience that takes a minute. It takes a minute, and it's a lot of talking, and it's a lot of answering some similar questions. I want to talk a little bit about the demo lesson or the demonstration lesson or the lesson plan draft if one is requested. Whoever wants to answer this question, tell me what you are looking for when you are asking a candidate for a lesson plan draft. And then the follow-up to that is what are you looking for when there is a teaching demo short for demonstration lesson? Anybody want to answer that? And then whoever wants to respond and add a little more texture to the response would be great.
I can take it. In terms of a demonstration lesson, well, first, the lesson plan, just that you actually know how to plan out a lesson. What's your objective? What will the students be able to do and demonstrate their knowledge throughout that? And then how do you close the lesson, which is almost as important, equally as important as how do you open the lesson, how do you close it? And then when you're with students, it is about what materials do you bring to support the lesson that you've planned? Um, and so, do you have your chart paper? Do you have your materials ready and available? How do you connect with students during the lesson? How do you move the lesson along? Are you able to adjust in the moment? What does redirection look like if a student needs that? Um, and then how do you hit the points of the lesson plan that you sent in? And then after you teach the demonstration lesson, you do have a follow-up conversation. Is that going too far, Liz? Or you want me to say that? Okay. There's usually a follow-up conversation where you reflect on the lesson. So be able to also, give yourself feedback around what you would have done differently. I often ask teachers, where would this lesson fit in a unit? And then if there's anything they would change or add, and then also like, have you taught this lesson before? So just be able to reflect on the teaching experience in the moment.
The only things I would add to what Roxanne said is how like I'm thinking about I would probably ask the teacher how they would differentiate the lesson for students. I'm looking at classroom management, like how are you managing students, especially you're walking into a classroom with students you don't know, and so how are you adapting to this space with new students, students you don't know. I actually just watched a demo lesson earlier this week, and it just so happened that the technology wasn't working immediately for the student, I mean, for the teacher that did the demo. And it was a really great opportunity to watch this person adapt in the moment. And it was actually really great for this person because they literally just jumped right in and kept going. And so it it was an opportunity where they could have fumbled, but they did really, really well. And it made them look really good because they didn't fumble. They just kept moving, kept going. So it showed me that they were able to, under pressure, just adapt and keep going. And that was really good as well.
Plan
Yeah.
for technology to fail and have your backup. Ramon?
I wouldn't add anything. The one thing I do look for is how are you dealing with names? Like, what's your strategy for being able to understand the kid's name? That's really helpful in terms of building an immediate connection with the kid. So what's the strategy for the names piece? I'm looking for that. Other than that, I wouldn't add anything else.
We've got some questions coming in. One that I think any of you could answer, but probably April. The question is for candidates for assistant or associate teacher, should they bring in their own supplies? And I guess, zooming out a little more, should teachers bring their own supplies? Like teaching candidates bring their own supplies? How would you answer that?
I personally I always assume that it's not available, right? Like I say yes. Um, when I was a teaching candidate, like when I was interviewing for teaching positions, I would show up with all my own pencils, my own stuff, just in case, because it's like the planning for the technology failure. If you have it, then you don't have to worry about anything going wrong because you're already prepared. And it just makes you look really prepared in the moment.
Fantastic. We've got some more questions coming in. One question is, I think this is our independent schools looking to see DOE standards on the lesson plan, for instance. And I think it might be important for people to listen to the distinction between the DOE standards and what schools are looking for specifically in lesson plans and in the flow of a demonstration lesson. So whoever wants to respond to that one.
I typically look for DOE standards if you're coming from the DOE. But also, I do think, actually, we don't require it, but when I see it on a lesson plan, it makes me excited because that's really important to think about skills and where students are at a particular time. So if you're coming in already with that frame of mind, it's actually a good look in terms of you have an understanding of where students are supposed to be at a particular grade level and time and space.
I would echo what Roxanne said. I'm not requiring it, but it always for me is a bonus to see and make I think it just looks good. And because I didn't say this earlier, but my background, I started in public school. I'm always like, ooh, like this person knows knows something a little bit more than someone that maybe didn't come from the DOE. So I'm curious to see where they're going with that. But I think ultimately what I'm looking for is that a person knows the structure of a lesson plan, and then I want to see what they do with that lesson plan because you could write an amazing lesson plan and then show up and not teach anything that you wrote. And so I want to know that you can create a lesson plan and then implement that lesson plan really well.
I think it's also important to note that some of the things that we may be looking for as we're reviewing resumes matter based on the age that the candidate is applying for. As the head of upper school at Brooklyn Friends School, when I'm reviewing resumes, I'm looking for content area that is highlighted. I'm looking for experience working with students of the age range that they would be working with for this position. I'm looking for some language in the cover letter that speaks to joy and passion around working with adolescents, young leaders. That to me is important. It matters much less that you have taught and that there are DOE standards. I know they exist, but I'm looking for something a little bit different. And it's not a good or a bad, it's just different because of the age. There's a question about how does this process look like for educators coming from a non-traditional school setting? I'm not sure what's meant by a non-traditional school setting. We do have different webinars that we've offered, and I encourage everyone, don't just pay attention to this one. There's so much information that we've put together on all of the webinars. One webinar specifically transitioning into independent schools from charter, public, parochial, and career transitions. That was officially hosted last week, but the recording is available on the NYSAIS website. So if the person who asked that wants to send me a follow-up message of what is meant by non-traditional school settings, that would be helpful. Because if you're a career transition person, we dedicated a whole section, a whole webinar to that. How long does it typically take to hear back from a school when you apply for a role, for a teaching role? Like, what's the length of time? And how is that different to an administrative role? Can you give us a sense?
I'm running two leadership roles, right? Searches for two leadership roles right now. I posted the job, got a bigger response for both. I gave myself a week to let people know either I'm gonna move you forward or I'm not gonna move you forward. Um, I figured a week was enough time for me to give the resumes, enough time and to really be thoughtful about planning and scheduling. It also took me a week to figure out Calendly, which is like I just couldn't get it. And so I give myself a week because I want to be, if people are submitting materials, I want to give their materials time and thought, but I also don't want to keep people waiting. So for me, it's within a week. I'm gonna let you know what the next step is. And then, then it takes a little bit longer because then you're scheduling interviews and whatnot. But for that first stage, for me personally, I like to do a week because then people are also they're also looking for other positions too. And if you're not going to move forward with me, then I want you to know that so you can kind of keep your process going. It really did take me like 2 days to figure out Calendly. I'm embarrassed to say. It just kept changing over. So
And now it's recorded, so now we know it's archived. For others, so there's a lot of positions that are posted. It's important for everyone to know that the positions that are posted on school websites and on the NYSAIS website and any of the other um, organizations, this is early-ish in the season. Many of our schools are sending those letters of agreement, contracts, whatever you call them at your respective schools, and they are likely due back between now and sometime in March. And so it becomes much clearer what the hiring needs are for a school in the next few weeks. So it is important for people to know that in particular. And depending on what the process is, one thing that I do want to highlight is when you apply, many of our schools are using the application process is going through a clearinghouse type program. And then from there, you're applying, and then it's landing in the inbox of either the hiring manager that's directly responsible for the hiring, an administrative assistant who was doing the support, someone in the HR team that is also assisting. So it depends timing wise. In some cases, anticipated vacancies are not confirmed vacancies. So they're anticipating a vacancy and will receive all these resumes and then will decide once they know confirmation from anticipated to confirmation, then they immediately start um, getting in touch with prospective candidates. So all of that is true. Is there anything else that anybody else wants to add before I go on to the next question?
I was just gonna say, I feel like it's really hard for me to say how long sometimes the process will take, but I do try to be very transparent and clear at every step of the process. So like after the phone screening, I will say, we'll be back to you by the end of the week, or we'll be back after the Zoom interview, we'll be back to you by the end of this process. So at every step, we'll try to get back to them within a clear time frame. So like Ramon said, they can move on in their process how they see fit, but the actual length of the process may feel a little bit longer than like a week. It may be more like 2 weeks or so, depending on the position.
I want to add, I agree with that, April. I'm not as tight on time as Ramon. But throughout the process, I give timelines. The other thing I would caution folks against is because even the folks I'm not going to speak to through those clearinghouses, I try to use the feature where you could just tell people, thank you so much, but we're not going to move forward with you. But I would discourage folks from sending multiple follow-up emails if you haven't heard, because that just, there's a lot going on and we'll contact you, but following up multiple times doesn't necessarily yield a better result. So I would caution folks against doing that.
I want to echo that too. It doesn't speed it up. And it's not for people, it's not for a lack of trying to be responsive to it. It's, you're running searches and you're also doing your actual job at the same time. And that, that can be challenging, but it's not for, oh, we don't care about your resume or I don't want to get back to you. It's definitely not that. And I do want to clarify, like these two positions that I have, I know they're open already, right? So I can start those searches early. Um, but when you're waiting to hear back, people have deadlines to return employment agreements that extends it a little bit more. So I just want to make sure I added that caveat. It's typically not a week, but because I know the positions and the situation, I can be faster in that regard.
I also want to note that, and it was mentioned earlier, when you apply, you are typically asked to submit references. I really want to underscore for everybody, however it is posted, however that school, that place of employment is requesting you to submit your materials, pay attention. Submit it in exactly the way that it is being requested. That would be the first thing. So if they ask you for everything in one PDF, put it in one PDF. If you don't know what that means, someone will be able to assist you to show you how to do that, for instance. Or you can certainly Google it or YouTube or whatever the source of the information is. It's really important that you follow the steps. If you are asked to submit a list of references, it is really important for you to know that typically references won't be contacted without your knowledge. And so you have advanced further along in the process. Now we're going to contact your references. Is that okay? My advice to all of you is that when you identify who your references are, that you follow up and make sure that they are aware of the position. They could speak to your strengths. They could speak to your opportunities and areas of growth. They have some working knowledge of the position so they can respond to questions directly. And that your references are available. And your references are also a reflection on you. So if you've listed someone who's not available, that will also delay your process. Ramon, there's a question for you. You mentioned coming up with a good system for knowing student names. What would you recommend? And April and Roxanne, if you all have any suggestions as well, by all means.
I think this speaks to the preparation piece, right? So, to April's point, bring your own materials, but you'll often be asked for a demo lesson. Is there anything you need? Is there anything that we should prepare for you? The school will try to accommodate you in some way. I think that's the opportunity to ask, hey, can I at least have the first names of the students? And if you want to create name cards or you want to create some sort of a name game, I typically look for like 10 cards, right? Like if you've asked beforehand, you at least know the first names of the kids and you can create a 10 card that you can make that into a game. Oh, I'm looking for this student. And then the student can come and you can introduce yourself. You can use that, but it's more about the preparation beforehand. If you've taken the time to ask the school for that piece of information, I think it shows a level of thoughtfulness and foresight and preparation.
And if you don't have that foresight, then you can bring some name tags and have students decorate and create their name tags so that you remember their names and then ask them how to pronounce it. So if you don't do the list beforehand, whatever, but just name tags, tent cards, something goes a long way.
Great. You can also ask students when you pose a question and they want to respond, please make sure you tell me your name. That's also a pretty simple way. And then, you could say, thank you for your point, Roxanne. And then you move on. And then a few minutes later, it might be an opportunity for you to say, oh, this connects to Roxanne's point earlier, if you're a kind of person that can do that. But those are some of the clues that you can give those that are observing you, that you are paying attention to making those connections with students. Um, there is this is an interesting question that's being posed because it's about not necessarily having the exact background in education, but for instance, an LMSW or any of those kinds of positions where you offer mental health support. If there's something that we know is that we are, our students' wholeness and well-being is really just something that we can never pay too much attention to. And so thinking about what it means as a mental health specialist, how do you position yourself to be able to transition both in terms of the training that you have and the previous experience that you have into a position at a school, an admin position or a teaching position or something along those lines? What advice would you offer?
I'll start out with this one. My degree was in mental health counseling from Teachers College, and I applied for a director of diversity position. Uh, that degree talked a lot about identity and systems, and I used that foundation, that scholarly, that research to speak about the ways in which I would think about that job from a systemic perspective, how I would think about identity, and how that can impact relationship building and how I can kind of weave that into the curriculum. But I was really just trying to look at, okay, what are the skills that you build with a mental health degree or a social work degree, right? It's that relationship building, and I think it's also thinking systemically and then being able to think through the job description, right? Because you're speaking to the job description, especially if the position statement talks about challenges and opportunities, and thinking how that skill set will help the school, how you can support the school with that specific skill set, like being as specific as to what the school is looking for, and then how your skill set that you've earned through your degree and your experience can speak to that. I think that's very intentional, and that's the approach I took, and it worked out for me in that regard.
I was gonna just say I also immediately think about it's specifically in lower school, our lower school counselor, um, mainly because so much of the work she does is connected to social emotional learning. She pushes into a lot of our classrooms and works with our teachers around building social emotional learning and structure in our classrooms and supporting our teachers in that way. So it's a really great way to learn how to build classroom practices and teaching practices if the ultimate goal is to become a classroom teacher, because our school counselor actually spends a lot of time in the classroom, if that's like something that is the ultimate goal, especially from the lower school. And thinking about, I recognize that in maybe middle and upper school, the school counselors may show up in a different capacity.
Great. There's a wondering about how likely are first year teachers to get jobs in independent schools. And I think two things to consider before I offer it for any of you to answer. Let's just be realistic about the fact that education as a field has decreased interest over time. This is statistically something that we are aware of nationally. There are fewer teachers in teacher education programs. There are fewer teachers entering our profession. And so that is an important thing to note. If you are someone who is interested in the teaching profession and you are at the beginning of your career, I think that's an important data point for you to be aware of and to think about what does it mean to be a camp counselor? What does it mean to be a coach? What does it mean to be a big brother or a big sister? What does it mean to have experience with young people in a variety of different venues that will give you experience that will amplify your candidacy if you are at the beginning of your career? All of that is important. By the way, it's also important when you are negotiating salary. Many schools will give you certain credits or recognition when considering what salaries to offer you based on the years of experience that you have with working with young people in a variety of different venues. So I do think that that's important to note. Do any of you have anything else to add just around first teachers and getting jobs in independent schools?
When they say first year, do they mean they've completed 1 year somewhere, or this would coming into the school would be their first year
How
teaching
about
ever?
both, just in case?
Okay, because I would say I love a new teacher because we need new teachers, and we all started out somewhere. And so for me, it would be like, what the same conversation. How has your experiences prior to this moment prepared you to be in a classroom working with young people? How do you talk about that? How do you conceptualize that? Um, and there's even a difference in how you talk about it. So if you've done student teaching, what are the ways you can demonstrate to me that throughout your student teaching you took initiative and were able to participate in the runnings of the classroom that would inform your work in a classroom now, versus if you were solely observing, that's fine too, but what did you take away from that, from the person you were observing, that is informing the way that you're approaching this class now? So it's really like, if you're new, can you talk philosophically and conceptually about your experience and what you've learned that's prepared you? And then if that's a good conversation, I could see me bringing you in for a demonstration lesson, and then that's where it's like, all right, does it all match up? And then how do you demonstrate that you're coachable? And that's really important for me to get a sense of in the interview process. How do you take feedback? And what does that look like? And do you have an understanding of yourself in that way that you can honestly speak to it? Because all of those pieces will help us to understand if the situation will work out in the future.
There was a clarifying comment. This is somebody who's asking a question because they're brand new to the teaching profession and just finished their teacher preparation program. And so what for me is really exciting is the opportunity for that person to speak to how excited they are about the profession, how excited they are to learn and develop their practice and really, with informed pedagogy, pursue the profession and the craft of teaching. And so that is really exciting. And yes, many, 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 many years ago, we all started somewhere. And how we talk about it, how we present ourselves, both in writing, so don't underestimate the power of a well-written cover letter that demonstrates you have some working understanding of the school, something about the position. You've made some important connections to your own experience and excitement, skill set. If you are an independent school alum, that would be an important thing to highlight and just talk about how much you loved and appreciated being a student, or that you are a student and you saw the depth of the relationships between the adults and students and how important that was to your learning and growth, blah blah blah, like all of that. I also want to just note, on the subject of cover letters, everyone, please be very, very careful with AI being the authors of your materials. I cannot stress enough how important it is for you to submit as close to original information, writing as possible, so that you are conveying who you are, because there's a lot of AI detectors out there, and it doesn't show up favorably on candidates, especially when multiple candidates submit very similar language in their letters. Just saying. I see you both came off mute, so please come on, let's talk.
Um, I would also say part of the process at my school is a writing sample on the spot, on demand. You won't get the question before then. And typically, we set up the computer with no internet access. And it's just you and the computer and the prompt in a room being asked to write about something related to the job that you're taking on. So if you sent us a cover letter that you didn't write, and now you have to write on demand, and we look at the two, and we also think about the person we met and the conversations we've had. If those three things don't match, then that will probably impact negatively on the process. So because you have to write on demand in most of these searches, I would say, just write your own stuff to begin with.
I would just say to we're educators. We have this is a real responsibility that we have. People are entrusting us with their children. We are impacting the lives of young people in very deep and meaningful ways. And this is just a question of integrity, because I mean, I just finished reading an article about AI engineers worried about their jobs, right? So I think it'll get to a point where, forget the AI detector, we won't be able to tell. And then it just comes down to a question of your own integrity. Um, and if you're going to be responsible for educating kids, having an impact on the lives of kids, then your integrity matters.
Thank you all so much for those responses. One question that is interesting. Typically, how do schools pull jobs once they're filled off the different sites, their school sites, the NYSAIS site, different places? Um, there's a question and a curiosity about that. Do you all have a sense of how that works at your respective schools?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as we've made an offer and it's confirmed, then yeah, we want to pull it off. NYSAIS, whatever sites we have, because I don't want to mislead people. And I don't want to just have to respond to additional emails. We have enough stuff to do. So yeah, you should, someone who's managing that process should remove it. If it's still on there, then obviously maybe it's still on there, you confirm, but it should come off.
The key there, though, that I want to double click on, Ramon, is the position will be taken off the respective sites once there is an offer that is confirmed and accepted. And that process may be a little bit longer. So you want to make sure that you're aware of that. There's a question about, is it okay to ask about turnover during the interview process, or how the position opened up? How would you advise someone um, to explore that or not? Like, what are your thoughts?
Just get they want to know if what someone got fired. Like what, I want
Is
to
it
clarify.
the verbatim? The question is it okay to ask about turnover rate during the interview process, or how the position opened up to begin with?
Hmm. Yes. Um, I've been asked, oh, can you give me a little insight into as to why this position is available? I think that's reasonable. Um, it's actually usually good, especially in a team teaching position, or if it's a late, um, like it's a summer hire. Uh, and I'm always happy to share if I can, as much as I can about like all the positions open. In terms of turnover, I think there's a finesse to asking that, though I think it's a good question because it gives you a sense possibly of um, how folks are staying in the school and what that maybe says about the school community. And so, what is the average tenure of teachers at this school is probably a way I would frame it, um, to get at that question. Because also and I know we're going to talk more about questions, but I do think having really specific and intentional questions to ask so that you can also get a sense of the school is super important.
Well, why don't we go there then? What are the types of questions that candidates, um, we know that there's the typical questions. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Why are you interested in this position? Those kinds of questions we know. But what are the kinds of questions that you would encourage candidates to consider asking? What are the range of questions that you would want to hear from a candidate that would make you go, hmm? I will open up with one that I appreciate being asked. And these are the kinds of questions that I don't necessarily suggest that you ask during the job fair. I'm going to transition and talk about the job fair in a moment because there are some questions that are job fair specific. One question that I do like in a conversational moment, typically on site or even during a Zoom is, um, tell me what your average day is like. Tell me what you enjoy most about your day. Tell me about an experience that you are particularly proud or a project or initiative that you launched that you're particularly proud of. Um, what do you believe your leadership legacy will be, or what do you hope students say about you in the future? I mean, any of those kinds of questions, I think, are questions that are trying to make connections and get to know me as a leader in a school, and are also having me use specific examples about my experience at the particular school to inform the way the candidate has a deeper sense of this community. Those are just a few off the top of my head that I've been asked through the years that I've appreciated. Any that come up for any of you?
Go ahead, Ramon.
A good one that I've been asked is what are you looking for in terms of how would you measure success in that first year? What's the if feedback? How do you give feedback? How do you want to receive feedback? The how do you want to receive feedback? I think I personally like that question because I think it does speak to the collaborative nature of a relationship, at least from a head of school with like a leadership team member, understanding that I'm going to be looking for feedback from them as well in terms of how we can do our job in the best way possible. So I think having the foresight to understand that you're gonna be offering me feedback as well, and asking what's an effective way to offer feedback. And that's difficult, and I think it takes a little bit of kind of courage and bravery to ask that kind of question. But I think it also speaks to understanding that it should be a collaborative relationship for the most part.
I would say I would echo all of that for leadership and administrative positions, Ramon. I would say for teaching positions, I like when people ask, what does, um, are there any mentoring programs or what supports do you have in place to, how do you support first year teachers and what does that look like in the school? Also, our schools talk a lot about community. So when someone asks, how does your school build community? What are some ways in which you do that amongst the faculty and staff or amongst students? I like that question. I also like when people ask us this is weird, but like why we stay at the school,
Sure, what
right?
keeps you here?
What keeps you here? Is a good question that gives you some information about how the people in the room feel about each other and the space that they're inhabiting. So,
One
Um,
question that I love when teachers, when you're sitting with a group of teachers, I love to ask teachers about what's their favorite lesson or favorite part to teach. Like I love to hear what excites a teacher about the specific content that they are guiding students through, and to see them come alive and the why. Like that to me is really exciting. April, I think I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. I like I think ask especially for teachers like asking what professional growth or like how do you support teachers' professional growth is always a good question. And for me, that is an indication that a teacher is like excited or interested in growing and stretching as a teacher. And recently I feel like a candidate asked me um about what our schools like, especially because we're a school that consistently talks about like equity and diversity, what our blind spots are in equity and diversity. And I thought that was a great question. I was like, that like made me say like, that was an excellent question.
Thank you. There's a question about what would be some examples of writing prompts that someone might get during the interview process. Any ideas, any suggestions about that? And then after this question, I'm going to pivot and talk a little bit about the job fair because we have about 8 minutes left.
can I just say one thing about questions? I think the point of the questions you ask have to demonstrate that you've done your homework. And so you've read the school's website, you have an understanding of who the school is, and you want to ask questions that show that, right? Like, so so you read the website, but don't ask things like, "What time does school start?" I don't know. That sometimes when people ask me that, I'm like, "It's a school, 8 o'clock. What do you mean?" Like we can talk about that later. Um, so just be mindful of the information you learn and how you're building your understanding of if the relationship's going to be a match.
Um, I would say usually in interviews, if I'm asked to write an on-demand writing sample, it's usually some kind of communication to a parent. Like it's like usually like, oh, a parent, something with a family or something going on with a grade, write a communication to the families or something like that. That's typically what I've seen.
I've also seen you have a scenario. What would your action plan be to address the scenario? That would be another one. And so you just have to outline, the steps. Um, and there's an understanding that you don't know all the specific the protocols or the specific people or anything like that, but just kind of a general, how do you approach a situation? I've seen that as well. Let's pivot to talk a little bit about the job fair. You've all been at the job fair. Some of us have been candidates at the job fair. It is I want to be really clear with everyone who's listening. You definitely want to get there between 9 and I'd say 9:15. I do an overview. I answer a bunch of questions ahead of time. I take you through all the materials that you receive. And if you haven't already pre-registered, please pre-register because I will send out a list of all the schools early next week once all the resumes go live and the database is available to schools. So you want to receive that list of schools so that you can directly begin to do your research in preparation for the job fair itself. Uh, it can be in the morning a lot, and I want to say that up front so that you take care of what it means to be in a space with a lot of people and noise and all of those elements. There's a question about, is there on the job hiring, on the spot job offers? No, this is a networking opportunity. There is multiple ways to learn about positions. Every school will have a list of positions that they have available at their table. There is a job postings board where by subject area and discipline, you will see, please come visit George Jackson Academy Brooklyn Heights Montessori School, the Calhoun School, Brooklyn Friends School, and see so and so for a position here. You'll see that and it'll be clearly stated, and then you can follow up directly with the school. And the other way is that if you've done your research, you've seen what's available on the school's website, and they may all be the same, but it's important to know that there are three ways. The fourth and final way is you just go up to a school and have a conversation. I am somebody who's interested in XYZ. Whether you see a position open or not, introduce yourself and have a conversation because there's an important opportunity to make a connection that you never know where that could lead. Any other thoughts since you've all been at the job fair? What advice would you offer a candidate who's really looking to make a good impression at this event?
Bring enough resumes. I really, when someone comes up and they're like kind of stingy with their resume, I'm like, okay, like, so bring enough copies. It doesn't have to be on fancy paper at all. Like, just bring enough copies so that you feel like you can give it to anyone because you never know if a position opens up a few years down the line or the person moves to a different school and they remember you. That is a connection that you're building, and the interview starts the minute you walk in that building. The interview has started the minute you walk in. So be mindful of your conversations, how you're interacting with folks. People are watching the whole time. Bring enough resumes and be aware that the interview started the moment you walk through the doors at Columbia Grammar.
And I would also say, even if the person at the school table isn't from a division or department that you're interested in, because the amount of time someone has come back from the job fair and handed me a stack of resumes and said, I met all these people that are for lower school or things like that, right? So the people there are thinking about the school as a whole, not just their department or their.
Uh, I also include to all pre-registered candidates just an overview, schedule of the day, some strategies, some tips. I talk about how many resumes to bring. Yes, I do understand that you are registering and schools have access to the database that is online. And in an ideal world, we wouldn't need paper. Um, and I recognize that there's lots of people using Wi-Fi and your resume may not come up quickly or as quickly for someone. So every technology challenge that could come up is real. Just having a resume, and Ramon said, you don't need the fancy paper. You just need it available to be able to hand in. Hi, my name is, I'm looking for a position, or I see you have a position posted. I'm so excited about this opportunity. I was wondering if we could speak about it. There are one question that you might want to ask at the job fair is you've taken my resume. We've had a wonderful conversation. Can you tell me what happens next on your ends? Who should I follow up with? And this is one of the things that I talk about in the morning during that morning briefing that lots of people have said really made a difference in terms of understanding the materials that are provided and how to navigate the job fair successfully. Anything else that you all can think of that would be a tip or a strategy? Good questions to ask.
The Zoom interview is a real interview, so dress for a real interview. I've definitely had interviews with folks where they're like casual because it's Zoom. It's an interview. I say wear a suit, wear professional attire. It's an interview. Yeah.
I just want to pause and say that we are about a minute out. First of all, I really want to thank three of you. Not only do I have tremendous respect for you and the work that you do and the ways in which you lead and show up on behalf of our kids and our colleagues, I also really recognize that we've all worked a long day and we are here and we're providing insight and wisdom to those preparing to enter our schools and to make way. For themselves within our communities. So thank you so much. And of course, thank you, Andrew, my behind the scenes NYSAIS partner. So grateful for you and your continued partnership in all of this. I want to let everyone know, please email if you have additional questions or if you want to explore something further, jobfair@nysais.org, jobfair@nysais.org. The email is all over the website. I answer. I really am a real person, and I really look forward to connecting and supporting you in your journey and in your process. I hope to see you on Saturday, February 21st from 10 to 1 p.m. at Columbia Grammar and Prep on the Upper West Side. Please make sure you pre-register. Please make sure you read things carefully, and that you follow up and ask any questions and help us to continue to spread the word about this job fair. It happens once a year. It's an extraordinary opportunity to network with independent schools and explore what could be. And for 3 hours of your time, it only happens once. I hope that it's worth it. It is for those of us that have hired at the job fair and that have been hired as a result of networking through the job fair. So with that, I want to say thank you. I want to say good evening, good night to everyone, and look forward to seeing you very soon. Bye, everybody.